Okay, another video clip, one of Mrs. H's video clips to help you with the exam technique, and this time it's on split brain patients, so from the Biopsychology section of AQA. So the question is, and I think this was from a sample paper 2, briefly evaluate research using split brain patients to investigate hemispheric lateralization of function. Okay, so it's a very wordy way of basically saying, right, let's evaluate the procedures and the methodology, etc., of the split brain patient research. Okay, so it's 4 marks, and so what you want to do is basically have maybe one strength well developed and one weakness well developed, or a couple of each, just briefly. So I've got a couple of things listed here which will be useful for you, hopefully. Okay, so let's start with the strengths. Sperry's work was very carefully standardized, as you know, very carefully controlled. So, and he basically made lots of variations from that to trial different points, different procedures, really, and so that produced objective empirical evidence of support, and obviously that furthers our scientific research, really. You could also say these experiments clearly demonstrated lateralization of function between the left and right hemisphere, and they also started a debate about the degree of communication between those two hemispheres. For example, the extent to which they are separate, or whether how much they work together on tasks. You could also say that it was a small sample, only 11 patients initially, but it was probably representative of the people who've had that operation. So you don't need all of those. Maybe one of those developed, maybe, and with another weakness developed, or possibly getting in 2 of each. That would be absolutely plenty. So weaknesses, we've already mentioned, there were only 11 participants in Sperry's sample, and these were all people with an existing problem of epilepsy. So it is a bias sample. In other words, it's not a cross-section of a population. And obviously, if you've got a bias sample, that means you're very limited in generalizing. It's limited in generalizability. In other words, it may not be possible to compare the brains of severe epileptics who've undergone brain surgery to the brains of typical people without epilepsy. So that, I would say, is probably enough for your 2 points for a weakness, and then including, one of these developed for your strength. If you wanted more weaknesses, for example, if it was a longer essay question, you could go on. Sperry's work has been oversimplified more recently, and more what we call popular psychology books and theories have tended to overstate those differences between the 2 hemispheres. And these days, modern neuroscientists believe that actually some functions associated typically with one hemisphere can often be compensated with or dealt with by another, or by the opposite hemisphere. Okay, if there's damage to one, the other hemisphere will compensate. If you really needed a bit more, we could always add in the tasks that were given were very low in ecological validity, just literally stating something or drawing something, and not really representative of problems faced by these sort of patients in the real world, and therefore, they lack mundane realism. Could put that in as well, which might just finish off that point. But for the number of marks you need here, 4 marks, this is far too much. You just really need to take one of each of these probably, and leave it at that. Okay, hopefully that will help. If we have a look at the mark scheme, let's look. I think this was sample paper 2, that particular question. So we've got a few little bits and bobs in here as well, specifically from the mark scheme. And remember that they're going to assess whether you are covering enough to put you into level 2, 3, or 4 marks. Okay, so evaluation is relevant, well explained, focuses on the usefulness of split brain research for the study of hemispheric lateralization, and it's generally coherent with effective use of terminology. Okay, so how useful have you managed to get across this, this sort of research for our understanding hemispheric lateralization?